I've clicked onto the global tropical overview for March the 12th, 2024. As is always the case in these videos, the weather expected are mine alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look to your local office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So we have two systems that we're going to be talking about today. We have Tropical Cyclone Filipo, which I believe I'm saying that correctly. If am not, I apologize. But you can see the system here along the coastline of Mozambique, and this will be coming inland in a few short hours. But we've also got another system that's going to be tracking towards Australia in the coming days, and I'll have more on that once we get through Filipo. So I'll leave a timestamp in the description if you want to skip ahead to that part of the video. But getting into Filipo, you can see it here spinning off the coastline of Mozambique. The system developed a couple days ago after sort of meandering around in the Mozambique Channel, coming across northern Madagascar and slowly tracking towards the south. And it finally developed and is now almost at landfall here in Mozambique. You can see the center right about there in the coastline of Mozambique, about here. So we're just hours away from the landfall of the storm. Now, the good news is the storm has been struggling over the past several hours quite significantly. You might be able to pick it out if you look north of the storm. There's some clouds moving towards the south. If we look at the water vapor loop, it becomes more obvious, especially north of the storm. You can see some of these thunderstorms here blowing up and their tops just getting sheared off towards the south. This is the effect of a large upper ridge across the Mozambique Channel. You could sort of see that here with northerly winds here all along the western or eastern end of Africa rather, turning into more southerly winds over Madagascar. And this denotes the upper ridge, which is centered right about here across portions of the Mozambique Channel and over portions of Mozambique. What you'll notice is that if the center is here, the storm is a little bit displaced relative to the center of this ridge. And because of that, we've got some of this flow on the western end of it coming towards it. And this is creating a little bit of a northerly shear onto the storm. And you could sort of see the impacts of that. You could see at the beginning of this loop, we had what appeared to be some pretty healthy convection sustaining over the center. We had plenty of whites over there. What you'll notice is, especially on the northern end of it, the whites seem to disappear altogether on there. What I think may have happened is there's some dry air here across at portions of Mozambique. And my theory is that some of this shear is starting to push this dry air towards the storm, and it's putting pressure upon it. And the thunderstorms that were there on the northern side of this center, or potentially even an eye wall, it could have been earlier, have just degraded because of that dry air. You can see the effects of this if we look at the microwave paths. So we've got two of them. This was from last night local time, and you could see a pretty menacing look. We had these thunderstorms wrapped completely around the center of circulation, and we had an eye and an eye wall. And if this had sustained, we could have potentially seen a phase of maybe some more significant intensification before landfall. But fortunately, the shear has come to save us in this scenario, and this is a more recent microwave passing. You can see it looks like the center maybe about here, maybe about there as well. It's kind of hard to pick out exactly where it may be, but you can see, regardless, the thunderstorms are no longer wrapping around to the northern side. It's a bit difficult to tell exactly what their westward extent is because this is a bit of a half pass right over the system. But we can get the semblance that that inner core structure that we saw on that earlier microwave pass has been disrupted pretty significantly. And it looks like it's completely degraded and perhaps has even caused some weakening. Now, having said that, the system does still have some significant winds with it, and there's a lot of convection with this. You can see, despite the shear, there's a lot of convection blowing up here over the center, and we have this large feeder band here still going into the center. And this is going to be drawing in moisture right into southern Mozambique. And we could see some significant rainfall across this region as the storm moves in. You can see this here on the rainfall product from the GFS. You can see areas in purple here, 50 millimeters or more of rainfall, and especially maximized along the coastline and areas even further inland. Rainfall totals of potentially 100 to 150 millimeters, and some localized spots greater than 150 millimeters of rainfall, and that could lead to some localized flooding issues across the region. Now, the good news is the storm is not going to be sticking around for too long. Eventually, a trough is going to dig in across southern Africa, and that is going to help recurve the storm, and eventually it's just going to be heading way south of here, and it will be out of our hair, and we won't have to worry about our storm anymore. But we will be turning our attention to the Australian region as there's a bit of activity going on right now. We've got some significant rising air across this region, and you can sort of see the effects of that just in this satellite image alone. You can see we have a ton of convection across this region, and in these events, you don't always get a tropical cyclone, but odds are definitely increased, especially when you're in peak season like we are, for tropical cyclone development. And naturally, we do have a potential candidate for a tropical cyclone to develop. And that is this low here spinning across the Indian Ocean, tracking towards the southeast as the sun rises over Western Australia today. You can see it there way southeast of the storm. Now, right now, this low is very disorganized. You can see as an effect of all this convection here east of the storm, there's just a lot of westerly flow in terms of outflow spreading away from these storms, and it's just shearing the storm completely apart. We've got the low-level center here completely void of really any convection. We've got one little burst there, but in terms of the general scale of convection, it's just void of much of anything. And all of its convection here is off towards the west, a result of all that easterly shear. Now, the storm is going to be tracking towards the southeast over the coming days. What we've got right now is way south of the storm. You can see here in the bent isobars west of Australia, we've got a little bit of a trough here, carrying the system towards the southeast. And this is going to persist over the next several days as we get into the latter half of this week. And then we can see this even better if we go onto the map of Australia here on the model map. You can see here's your trough, and here's your storm coming into the scene into Western Australia. Now, there's a bit of model disagreement here on exactly what happens with the storm over the next few days, and this is going to be very important. What happens over the next 3 to 4 days will make some big implications on what could potentially happen outside of the forecast period, being 5 days, so what could happen latter half of this weekend and into next week. Right now, the models are disagreeing on a bit of strength of this ridge here across Australia. You can see in the black isobar here, this 588 line here. This is a ridge across much of Australia right now. And what this is going to be doing, as this trough brings it into the scene, is it's going to be working to do the opposite of the trough. So while the trough is trying to get this storm to come right into Australia, this ridge is going to try and push it away. So eventually what happens is the storm just stalls out across this region here, and you can see it really slow down. It starts to get towards the northern coast of Western Australia and just sits there for a few days. And it could be sitting there, maybe Friday, Saturday, Sunday on this run. And then eventually it starts to turn towards the southeast as the ridge takes over. Now, the model disagreement here is, like I said, the strength in the ridge. If you look at the European model, you can see that the ridge is a little bit stronger. You can tell that the GFS comes a little bit further east because the ridge appears a bit weaker. You can see that instead of a 588 line, we have a 585 line here over Australia. And it seems to weaken, so far that I can tell, a bit quicker than on the European model. And because of that, because the ridge is a bit stronger here on the European, has a little bit of a stronger push towards the west, and it keeps it from getting as far east on its run. And you can see it here by Thursday, and I can even go into the weekend. It has not made it nearly as far east as the GFS. The GFS is over here, the European is over here, an effect of this stronger ridge here across of Australia. We can also get another opinion from a newer model. This is an AI-run European model, and you can see it shows a fairly similar solution. Maybe a stronger ridge across Australia and a storm much further west. And another opinion, the Canadian model does also seem to agree more so with the European on this ridge being a little bit stronger, and you can see it further west here. But the reason this makes the long-term forecast more important is because if the system does potentially slip maybe a little bit further east here, like the GFS, you saw it in the latter half of this forecast period on this forecast, it starts to turn back towards the south and west as this ridge starts to take over. The trough is left, and now ridging is taking over, and it's going to start tracking the storm towards the southwest as the flow around ridges in the southern hemisphere is counterclockwise. And you can already tell that this may be a big issue. If the storm is further east, you do increase the potential for maybe a land impact here, anywhere along the coastline of Western Australia. There is still potential for an impact here across Western Australia. You can see that there on the European, it starts to clip Western Australia on its run. But the overall likelihood, or possibility rather, of a landfall of the storm is decreased with the further west storm on this run. And exactly how far west or east is the storm going to get? Not sure. We can't tell you that right now. These are fine details. Another issue with this is it's a weak steering pattern once the storm stalls. This is the sounding from the GFS as the storm is stalling off the coastline of Western Australia. You can see that here's your flow from the ridge over Australia trying to push it away. But below that, we've got some flow trying to push it towards Australia still. And a lot of these forces just end up canceling each other out. So the storm is just sitting there along the coastline for days, and small changes could have a huge impact. In one example, I'll just throw one out there. Say the storm perhaps a little bit stronger than models do depict. You see that this flow aloft is a little bit out of the north compared to down below that layer. If the storm is a little bit further or a little bit stronger, it's going to feel more of this flow, and it could potentially just track south slowly towards the coastline of Western Australia, and you could have a potential issue there of a storm getting really close to land. It may not even make landfall, but you could have a storm getting pretty close to land, and it could be, maybe a bit stronger. The environment is fairly favorable here for some intensification. You can see the shear is pretty low, and the environment in this 200 millibar plot is pretty favorable. There's no big lows or highs to really shear the storm apart, at least on this model run. The European may suggest a little bit more shear, but of course that's dependent on location as well. So it's a very sensitive forecast right now for the storm. And of course, right now it's no imminent threat. We're not talking about an imminent big cyclone threat to Western Australia. This could absolutely turn out to be another weak storm that goes out to sea, and we hope for that. We don't want to see any storms hit land, but of course it is March. It is peak season here, so it's important that you keep a close eye on it if you're along the coastline of Western Australia, and make sure your cyclone preparedness kit is ready, and stay tuned to the Bureau of Meteorology so you can stay up to date on the latest information on the storm as it develops. This is their current forecast cone, and you can see the uncertainty in their forecast cone. I think this really expresses the uncertainty that we have on this storm. Having the storm track towards the southeast, and they are taking more of a European approach, which that seems to be the consensus right now of a more westward track. But they do note the possibility in this forecast cone. Remember, these cones mean that this is where the center could track. So while the center track is here, it is absolutely possible that it deviates even this far east from the center track. And like I talked about, that could cause some issues here. Which you can see here becoming a cyclone as we get into this weekend and into early next week. And again, those along the coastline of Western Australia should just keep an eye on it. I'll leave links to the Bureau of Meteorology website in the description, so you can go to their website and get the latest bulletins on this. We've got time to watch it, fortunately, here. In fact, there's maybe a lot of time. We have the entire week. So I'll keep you all updated here as well. I'll have more videos throughout the course of this week as the system does track towards the southeast. Oh, that's all that I've got for today. The tropics getting a little bit active. We do have some other systems on the northern and eastern end of Australia, but those systems are a bit more inconsistent. It's a bit of a model mess right now on exactly what's going to happen with those. And those aren't really as significant threats as this one could be here in the Indian Ocean. But stay safe in Mozambique as Tropical Storm Filipo comes in. Hope everyone stays safe and is prepared for the storm as it comes through. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.